Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Oblong Online's celebration of Conjunction's 40th anniversary. I'm Susanna Hermans, owner of Oblong Books in Millerton and Rhinebeck, New York. Thank you for joining us from all over the country tonight. Please drop in the chat where you're joining us from. I want to just start the evening off with giving you a little rundown of how tonight is going to go. I'm going to turn things over to Bradford Morrow in a moment, and he will introduce each of our speakers. If there's any time at the end of the event, we will take some questions. So go ahead and put them in the Ask a Question feature that you'll see at the bottom of your screens. We also highly recommend that you pick up a copy of Conjunctions. I will throw that link in the chat. I believe there's also a buy the book button at the bottom of your screen, but I'll put it in the chat as well. Do not miss this incredible anniversary issue. Tonight we are joined by our host, Bradford Morrow. He's the author of 10 books of fiction and the founding editor of Conjunctions, a Bard Center Fellow and professor of literature at Bard College. He's the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship in Fiction, an Academy Award in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and the Penn Nora Majid Award for Excellence in Editing a Literary Journal. Brad, I will turn this over to you.
Thank you very much. And welcome, everyone, from all over the place. This is wonderful. Stephen Moore from Ann Arbor. Stephen and I were in high school together. Who would have thunk it? We'd be together all these years later. Anyway, thank you, Susanna, and everyone at Oblong Books, and for all of you for joining us tonight. If 40 years ago, some spirit from the future had appeared straight out of a Blakean vision in the poet Kenneth Rexroth's big, glorious, dusty book barn, where a guy in his 20s, that would be me, sat with Kenneth, my much older friend and mentor, and told us that the idea for a new literary journal we were discussing wasn't some idealistic fantasy, but would in fact go on to survive, even thrive for 4 decades. I have to think that Rexroth and I would have told the poor misguided creature to go haunt somebody else's library, mess around with somebody else's wishful dream. But here we are, Kenneth in spirit, me in virtual flesh. 4 decades and some 30,000 plus pages of work by nearly 2,000 writers later. The Blakean angel would have been right all along. I remember telling Rexroth that the project needed consistently to embrace that. I'm in New York, so pardon the sound effects. I remember telling Rexroth that the project needed consistently to embrace work that was formally edgy, both pioneering and understanding of the literary terrain already mapped by others, and more like an anthology than a mimeographed stapled little mag. I loved and learned from earlier little mags like Angel Hair, Floating Bear, and Ed Sanders' succinctly titled Fuck You, a Magazine of the Arts, just as I learned from poetry journals like Monty Bora and Language. But that wasn't what I was after. What I wanted to do was publish innovative fiction, poetry, plays, essays, interviews, and hybrid works that defy genres altogether, in a format that wasn't easily tossed out, unread. What I envisioned was something as solid and substantial and beautiful as the work inside would be. An idealistic yin-yang of form and content. It would be a home, as I wrote in my editor's note to this issue, for writing that was neither tiredly conventional nor greenly experimental, but fearless, resonant, realized, memorable, and lasting. Conjunctions might be a good name for it, I told Kenneth. A part of speech whose job was to connect words and phrases, but also proposed a convergence of people and ideas, a literary meeting place, a crossroads. For me, it's truly been the journey of a lifetime. One of the things I'm personally proudest of is the number of writers I was able to publish for the first time or very early in their careers. Writers like Mei Bersenbrugge, David Foster Wallace, William T. Volman, San Shui, Forrest Gander, Shelley Jackson, Peter Cole, Mary Caponegro, Chinelo Akparanta, Martine Bellin, H.J. Carrillo, Nam Lee, Raven Leilani, Robert Antoni, Vanessa Chan, and many others like Ben Okri, Julia Elliott, and Isabella Hamad, who are in the issue, as well as Karen Russell, who is here with us tonight. Emerging, even fledgling, when I first read their manuscript submissions, many of these writers have gone on to have distinguished careers, winning Pulitzer Prizes, MacArthur Fellowships, National Book Awards, Booker Prizes, and most importantly, wide readerships around the world. Needless to say, I'm honored that we've been the literary home from which so many have set out. Before moving on to our four stellar readers this evening, I'd like to take the opportunity to express my profound gratitude to Conjunction's publisher for the past 30 of those 40 years, Bard College. In particular, I owe a debt of gratitude to Leon Botstein, Dimitri Papadimitriou, and Robert Kelly, who were crucial in bringing the journal to Bard, and to everyone at the college who's been so supportive over the years. Now, on to the reading. Akil is first. Akil Kumarasamy. I first encountered Akil's work last year when reading her debut collection of stories, Half Gods, while serving as one of the Bard Fiction Prize judges. Akil, I realized at once, is one of those uncommon writers whose compassionate understanding of the human family is perfectly matched by her storyteller's gifts to bring its many tales to life. Her language is vivid, unabashedly lush, and crackles with unexpected imagery. Like Jamaica Kincaid's first book, At the Bottom of the River, Half Gods gathers a variety of stories that collectively have the sweep and scope of a novel. But rather than reimagining an island in the Caribbean, Half Gods ranges from Sri Lanka to the shores and towns of New Jersey. And instead of tracking the emotional growth of one girl, Half Gods is about a lively, multi-generational family whose interactions, memories, and hopes for the future are by turns hilarious and tragic, meditative, and explosive. When, after she was awarded the 2021 Bard Fiction Prize, I asked if she had a new story I could consider for the anniversary issue of Conjunctions, she sent me the manuscript of The Healing, which I read with excitement and accepted by whatever digital version of Return Mail is. It's haunting and memorable and is clearly the work of a young writer who stands at the beginning of a consequential career. It's my pleasure to welcome Akil Kumarasamy.
Thank you so much, Brad, for that lovely introduction, and also for including me in this beautiful issue for the 40th anniversary of Conjunctions. And congratulations to Conjunctions. I'll just start reading from the beginning of the story. The Healing. For a year and a half, you were dying. Flat on your back, staring at the ceiling from the same side of the bed where you used to wet the sheets as a child. Except now the smell of urine brings you unusual delight. It reminds you of your grandparents' home with its cow dung floors, your grandfather shelling peanuts as your grandmother cleaned the remains. The man died when you were only 8. The knowledge that you might soon be joining him feels like a small consolation for everything you will not become. A wife, a mother, a toothless woman. Your grandmother always said marriage is a liability. So maybe 29 is not an unreasonable age to take leave of this world. Your liver is like a gash deep within you that will never heal. You, Lady Prometheus, wake again and again to your own suffering for some ancient crime. The gift of your own fire to a man 2 years your junior. All very well, except he's Catholic and your mother is an unscrupulous archer who can shoot hymn after Hindu hymn without blinking an eye, wounding you in all the unlikely places. The time you twisted your ankle trying to save a wounded sparrow that you later asphyxiated accidentally in a shoebox in your closet. The ragged haircut you gave yourself because you wanted to look like Madonna from a Like a Virgin album cover. Because you wanted to look like anybody but what your parents fashioned you to be. And now this finger you cut while treating a patient in Shimla, exchanging the most intimate of fluids with a stranger. Fulminant hepatitis B is no joke. You'll need a liver transplant, but that won't happen. How could you have been so careless, your mother asked you when you first arrived home? curled up with your engorged liver bulging from your belly. She looked at you like you were a wolf that had eaten her most precious child. For 2 months, you haven't looked at the mirror, but you were told that you have the complexion of mango pulp. Your mother visits you for exactly 5 minutes a day because you can't bear to see yourself in her eyes, the only daughter she had prayed for at 16 temples and after 2 miscarriages. The years she had made you undesirable by smearing you with charcoal and growing out your nails into talons so no evil spirits would carry you away. And she can't handle hearing your screams. Your father is a surgeon and believes in bilirubin levels. When he saw your test results, he looked mortal for the very first time. He only comes to see you when he thinks you're sleeping, but you always smell the whiskey. Besides your parents, no one comes to check up on you. In medical school, you always found yourself at the center of a swarm of friends, managing their quarrels, heartbreaks, illnesses, their names strung together on the back of your mother's old phone book. Shiva, Rangita, Priya, Ramesh, Venkateswaran, Nikhil, Saraswati, Daniel, Bhavana, Sandeep, Ravi, Joshi, Kavita. You once sat on a stool in a crowded overnight bus to Chennai with your knees pressed to your chest because you had to see your roommate Bhavana. And even though you knew laryngitis was not fatal, you couldn't stand to see her hurt. For years, you had planned to marry your gay best friend Shiva, who had followed you from childhood to medical school and always seemed to be in a persistent state of agony. He told you how his parents were drugging him, the teachers persecuted him, the sky pissed on him wherever he walked. You, barely over 150 centimeters and weighing 48 kilograms, wanted to protect him. This kind of bleeding love never felt like a sacrifice, but now on your deathbed, they have abandoned you, which should come to know as no surprise, and yet still makes you feel at times weak in your knees. You have always been too soft-hearted, crying for the 3-legged dog limping along a dirt street, the mother with the groaning child protruding like a tumor from her hips. This suffering does not vanish, and sometimes when you blink, you have the brief sensation of seeing an image twice, as if it has happened before, endlessly. Becoming a doctor seemed like a natural choice for you. In the 10th standard, you scored the highest marks in the state, and as a reward, your parents shipped you off to an elite convent boarding school where you slept on a cement slab and never saw sunlight. After 6 months at that school, you refused to eat, and the sisters watched your skin stretch around bone until your parents agreed to bring you back home. You still refused to open your mouth. "Why don't you speak to us?" your mother stammered. When you joined the 12th standard, you fell ill with typhoid, malaria, and dengue. Once a golden girl and now a case study for all the diseases on the subcontinent, you spent most of your school days collapsed on your desk, counting your breaths. You did poorly on most of your exams, and failure had a surprising thrill for you, like walking naked into an icy river. You wanted to sink in it. Still, you got accepted to a private medical school in Chennai, the hot marine air whipping as you studied, books gutted open on the floor. At midday, you ate at the canteen. The rice had worms, and your hostel mates threatened to poison the warden with their parasitic shit if he didn't clean up the kitchen. During those first few months, you kept to yourself, ventured nightly through the unknown city that had no memories of you. And picking a rotten jamun from a tree one evening, you thought, this is happiness. You met Ravi your second year at medical school. He was 3 years older and dressed in the same all-beige color palette as your father. He said he had noticed you the first day you arrived on campus. You were mostly flattered, but later would wonder if he had mistaken you for someone else. He preferred to spend his time alone, drinking foreign beers and staring at moths. When he confessed his feelings, you didn't even think to check to see how you felt. The pull of being desired was like the sun. It required nothing of you. You dated for 4 years. He proved to possess the bat-like ability of seeing through your mind with his chatter. Leaning his head on your lap so you couldn't move, he said he would have killed himself if it weren't for you. The heaviness of his breathing left you sore. After graduation, when you decided to visit your cousin in Los Angeles for 3 months, Ravi arranged your hands on his cheeks. "See you soon, darling," he said, and pecked you on your nose. On the flight, you found the turbulence soothing, kept waiting to be kicked off your seat like in those American rodeos, but you reached the City of Angels without a scratch. Each day with your cousin was celebrated with a fresh blunt, hand-picked and rolled from the garden. Before this meeting, you had spent only 17 days with him, not even 3 weeks, and cumulatively, you knew very little about him. He was 24, worked as a software engineer for a film company, and had visited India only once, his parents immigrating to New Jersey in the 70s. He didn't speak much Tamil, but he loved French cinema. Though you studied French, you were a better writer than speaker. Your teacher pronounced all the X sounds. But walking around downtown LA, he'd whisper something to you, and you'd reply, "Oui, oui." And even if you didn't understand, you enjoyed the feeling of him smiling back, the reassurance that you were perfectly understood. Maybe it was all the sun that seeped into your bones that awakened you to your own deficiencies, or maybe you wondered if you were following a profession simply because of your father, or if you even knew where yourself began and your parents ended. The job application to Pollo Loco took you 10 minutes. They said you were overqualified, and probably because you started weeping in front of the customers and repeating the menu, which you had spent an hour memorizing, they handed you a uniform to shut you up. You liked watching the oil bubble, the synthetic smell of your clothes stained with unknown sauces. When a customer asked if you spoke Spanish, you said, "Oui, oui." One evening after work, you walked in on your cousin half naked, pulling lint from a girl's head. They looked like they both had stepped out of a washing machine. You had never touched Ravi, which might make you seem a little naive. Early the next morning, while listening to bird squawk, you broke up with him over the phone. And though you feared he might strangle himself with a telephone wire, in less than a month, he was engaged and married to some girl from Gujarat. You didn't want to leave LA, but your father informed you your grandmother had gone into cardiac arrest. And in your distress, you thought someone had locked up her heart. And in some sense, that was true. By the time you reached India, she was dead, and everything felt far away from another lifetime. The 19-year-old manager of the Pollo Loco still wrote you letters, proclaiming again and again his incandescent love for you. He was really a poet. One day we might lie side by side before all that remains is the corn husks of our bodies. When you began your medical residency in Manipal, you lived across the street from your childhood friend Shiva, who preferred writing through the nights to sleeping. You would catch him on his balcony under the light of the cigarette and lantern, looking more studious than you'd ever known him to be. He was the one who broke the news about Ravi's wife's pregnancy. "That could have been you," he said. And because you still didn't want to become a doctor, you indulged in the image of you seated in a plushy rocking chair, your feet raised, becoming fatter than your late uncle Lakshman. Instead of motherhood, you were handed your first real patient at gunpoint, a big-time mobster, Premji. The doctors, huddled in the corner of the room, eyed the bodyguards. According to the logic of the hospital director, a young girl was less likely to be killed if she failed. You had never operated on anyone before, and Premji was almost a cadaver, with failing kidneys, failing liver, failing heart. Blood oozed from every hole in his body. You didn't even know the number of people he had killed, but you remembered Rumi. "Out beyond ideas of right and wrong, there is a field. I will meet you there." As the half-dead man spat phlegm in your direction. Damn your soft-boiled heart. You only spoke broken Kannada and Hindi, while Premji talked by gurgling sound. Together you made a befuddling couple. After your first day treating him, you had ordered his bodyguards to leave. "Look, I'm all you have," you said, and stacked books on nephrology and gastroenterology in the corner of the room. You slept on a cot beside him. Sometimes when he fell asleep, you thought he looked like your father, if your father had been run over by a lorry. When Premji was well enough to leave the hospital, he gave you his silver ring, and you felt the blood money in the metal. He would die 2 years later, but no one would blame you. They all knew you were his angel, who conjured for the old crook his last morsel of life. You never had to pay for a meal when you went out. The bill was always on Premji. Fear of him lived on. Okay, I'll end there. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And get your issue of the 40th anniversary of Conjunctions.
Thank you, Akil. Shane McCrae is next. When, at the urging of our managing editor, Evangeline, I first read Shane McCrae's poetry, it was as if I had been reading it forever. So fully did I connect with his voice and vision. I can't begin to imagine how many writers' manuscripts I've read over the years, but after we solicited work from Shane, I can say with absolute honesty and certainty that it's a rare and richly moving experience to encounter writing that had such an instant impact on me. His poems combine edginess with assurance, political clarity with emotional understanding, spirituality with hard-won grit, a profound sense of history and futurity, as well as a cultural long view and deeply detailed vision of the minutiae that make up an individual life. Frankly, Shane's a poet I would publish in every issue if I could get away with it. His most recent books are Sometimes I Never Suffered and The Gilded Auction Block, which was shortlisted for the T.S. Eliot Prize. He's a Guggenheim Fellow and has won both a Lannan Literary Award and a Whiting Writers Award. And later this year, the Cleveland State University Poetry Center will release an expanded version of his first book, Mule, with an introduction by Victoria Chang. I'm delighted to welcome Shane McCrae.
Thank you, Brad, for that introduction, and thank you also for publishing me. I never actually thought I would be in Conjunctions, and I'm still excited about it. And I want to second Akil. You should all get this issue, and also thank you, Brad, for having me here, and thank you everybody at Oblong, and thank you, Evangeline. So I'm gonna start with a poem from the issue, and then I'm going to read some other poems. This poem is called Ode. A cup from the shelf, cup from behind the measuring cup, a blue cup from when Eden was a toddler, a child's cup who held the cup in two hands like a grown-up holding hot cocoa, a cup from the shelf behind the measuring cup, itself glass and perfectly transparent, except for the lines and numbers, red lines and red numbers, through which no light passes, without which it, the measuring cup, is a pouring cup, a handle and a spout, no other use for it if parts of it didn't obstruct the gaze with its familiar information, and a filling cup, same use, 2 ounces, then 4 ounces, then 6 ounces, then a cup, and then a final inch, toward which the cup has seemed the whole climb of its body to a spire of unmarked glass, a blank that meets the high unmeasure of its course, a filling cup, a pouring cup, a handle and a spout, a beak, a lip, no, name I know, half spout, half beak, whole lip, the top half. If it were a spout, a beak shorn off, no need for, if it were a mouth, another half to make it whole. The human mouth in parts, each dignified, each named as if it were a whole, a lip, a tooth, a tongue, a cup from the shelf, cerulean, too big for her to hold with one hand when she was small enough to be satisfied by what the cup could hold. So held it as if she were savoring hot cocoa and imagining herself in far another country, at a cafe, at a table on the sidewalk, wearing perhaps a frayed red scarf and effortful ensemble, calculated to appear to anybody native to the city, casual, native to the city, and so to be the stage for the surprise of the native to the city when her slight but unmistakably American accent is heard, as she responds to the inquiry about, say, local politics with which she was approached by the native to the city. And so she set her cocoa down and spoke. A cup From the shelf, cerulean, frosted like frosted glass, though plastic, a clouded, clear ocean, ocean mixed with sand, kicked from the ocean floor, an ocean at a shore, pulled down, and filled with punch made from fruits I can't imagine making the flavor they have made. Blue with small dying clouds, rising and falling just beneath the thrashing surface. A small patch of thrashing, small white clouds that seem to rise, though they are dying, eagerly to rise, to meet the running child creating them. And then I'm just going to read, I don't know how many this is, I think it's 5 more poems, most of which are sonnets. This is called In the Ditch Where the Camera Finds My Body. I'm splashing in the driveway in a ditch in which a corpse of rain has gathered. Here, a corpse has gathered. Wearing nothing, a full diaper, I am 3. A clear sky leans as if upon a bar upon the house, and everyone in the picture, my grandmother, me. I am the rain come down. My mother's parents have just kidnapped me. I am the corpse in which I play. I'm dancing in the corpse. The clear sky sickens, watching, but with no clouds in the sky. The sky can't move away. Behind me, picking flowers, my mother's mother sees, the green has fled the leaf. Oh, reader, listener, stay. You are now evidence. This is explaining my appearance in certain pictures. In pictures now, I do not smile and didn't then. I would laugh if I was being tickled. And sometimes one, my mother's mother, would tickle me and the other would take the picture. My mother's father. And so sometimes I'm not smiling, but I'm laughing, my eyes closed and my mouth open, almost like I'm screaming, but I'm laughing. When I was a child, in pictures, with my kidnappers, with one, my mother's mother always, I am sitting, most often in her lap, her arms around my blurred waist. She has me on Ritalin. And the trick is wait until the laughing stops. As the mouth closes, you can take the smile. And this is, well, this has a word in the first line. I'm always anxious about how it's going to sound. I always think it's going to sound like gift. But then whenever I hear it in my head, it doesn't. It's GIF, like the moving picture. This is in the house from which I was kidnapped. The pale blinds rise and fall, a gift forever. The blinds move on their own. At first, my father stands with the string between his fingers, first and middle pulling, even after it tears into his fingers, tears the first and middle skin. Him pulling, letting go, his blood staining the length of the looped string nearest him. He pulls the string for years. Eventually he steps back from the window, into the room. He steps back, doesn't turn. Now he watches from a shadow in the room for a small child to be returned to him. I see him watching from deeper in the shadow whenever I look into his eyes. It grows the way a child grows. This is, I have mixed my labor with the soil. Back at the old house, the woods no entry now. How much remains, if any, of my blood and skin in the forest up the hill? Unending the humiliations, so small you can't talk about them, or they stop being true. Such as sound loyal in your head and do betray you on your tongue. It is my body still, more mine than when how long ago I bled at war in the woods with boys I wanted to like me, so I let them hurt me there. I wore a helmet from the army surplus store, hoping I would be hunted and shot in the head, hoping I'd hear the BB strike, to squeeze through brambles my own blood made thick. And this is the last poem I'm going to read. Conjunctions published a kind of longer poem of mine online in January called Hex. And a few months after I wrote Hex, I managed to write a few other poems that I think of as sort of not exactly sequels, but poems coming after Hex, and they're all called after Hex. And so this is After Hex 3. One's opportunities to be unhappy are one's single-most inheritance, all other unities requiring acknowledgement of pendant interests. It's a miracle to whom, what person, you're still alive. The city is an alphabet of numbers, those past 26, a sudden never-ending and boundlessness. But once so short and narrow, you sang it as you smashed toy trains together, the sneering green engine smashing into the blue engine that really smiled. How useful, but how really useful. Reverse nostalgia of the unfamiliar grid becoming home. All comfort is decay. The city, you're sure, is not a living thing because it gets harder as it decays, more fatal where there's less of it, until it's gone and all at once not fatal, in hills you once imagined, green hills cushioned soft, upon which you imagined you would lay a gingham blanket, a wicker basket, then from the latter pull a cartoon sandwich and a cartoon slice of pie on a white plate. Life a cartoon, the world except the slice itself is plastic. A dog's chew toy, your dog's toy. It matches neither world exactly, not the cartoon world you when you were a child imagined, and not the world, the wrong colors in the cartoon, the texture of the colors wrong. No life in the world. No life at all, but in the cartoon it's too much of the world and all the life in the world, the plastic pie. All comfort is decay. And you have spent your middled life searching for the turkey leg the greedy wolf pulled last from the basket in the cartoon, after watching which your imagination then developed almost without your input. You've searched passively, it's true. You sat at the dining table in the afternoon, and who are they, this family? You want to say arisen, but you want to say they manifested like moaning spirits in a bog, uncertain where you got the image from. Every Thanksgiving you have sat at the festooned table in the afternoon, a bib from the Red Lobster in the heart of the next town over around your neck, knife in one hand, fork in the other, and licked your maw exactly like the greedy wolf, as if your hunger were a spell you cast on the food. But never has the cartoon turkey leg appeared. The perfect, brazen turkey leg you've hungered for since you were small, when you first saw the brazen leg drawn steaming from the picnic basket like a sword drawn steaming from the entrails of your enemy. Thank you.
Wow, just fabulous, Shane. That's amazing, amazing work. Thank you so much. Karen Russell is next. Karen's first appearance in Conjunction was back in 2005 in our Secret Lives of Children issue, when she was a yet unknown, mind-bendingly precocious 24-year-old with all the promise in the world. Promise I think we can all agree she has more than fulfilled. Her story, and more to go, Karen, more to go, right? Her story in that issue, From Children's Reminiscences of the Western Migration, remains one of my favorites, and her contributor's note read simply, Karen Russell's first book, a collection of short stories, is forthcoming from Knopf. Did you have a title for the story by then, or for the collection by then? No, right?
No, I didn't.
So when St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves was published, what I and a circle of friends and admirers already knew about Karen, that she was a game-changing, brilliant supernova in the universe of fabulous and fantasy writers, a sublimely mature student of human nature, a slinger of metaphors and a narrative mesmerist, became very clear to a large readership. St. Lucy's was followed by her first novel, Swamplandia, in 2011. Another collection of stories, Orange World, in 2019, and last year, the novella Sleep Donation, each one of which built upon the imaginative foundation laid out in her earliest stories, of which I'm happy to say we published our fair share. Karen's many prizes include the New York Public Library Young Lions Award, as well as Guggenheim and MacArthur Fellowships. She's a dear and generous friend, and I couldn't be happier that she's with us here tonight. Karen Russell.
Thank you, Brad. And I apologize, guys. My connection is not ideal. So if I sound like a dying robot, maybe someone can let me know. I'll just turn the camera off and keep reading to you. It's an honor to read with these incredible writers. And Brad has been a supporter whose faith meant so much to me. I loved conjunctions. I still remember where I was standing, like what block I was standing on in New York when I found out they took a story. And I desperately wanted to be in the 40th anniversary issue in like the most amazing company. And yeah, I feel like Brad held a plane for me. If you've ever been worried you're gonna miss a flight, like Brad was on the intercom, like run your ass off, get down here. And I'm just really, really happy to be in here and to celebrate this. You know, my own 40th birthday in a couple of weeks. So I feel like we're aging great. That's how I feel. Okay. All right. Is that a little bit better, Susanna? Let's see. Is that any better? Uh-oh.
I'm here. We can hear you.
Great.
It's better
right.
without the video, so we'll leave it off.
Okay. All right. Sorry, guys. Sorry if I sounded like the Charlie Brown teacher. Oh, good. Glad to hear that. So this is a story about an aging unicorn and a 40-year-old pregnant woman, the Cloud Lake unicorn. Before I started living on extraordinary time, I used to set my watch by Garbage Thursday. My landlady often jokes that Garbage Thursday is my Sabbath. Garbage Thursday is a secular ceremony of reckoning and forgetting. You hear the same hymn booming down our leafy block, the trash bins bumping and scraping over asphalt. The rolling harmonies of a neighborhood remembering in unison that this is our weekly chance to liberate our lives of trash. Smells and peels, used neon condoms and yoki eggshells, kombucha six-packs and leopardy bananas, down the driveways they come, our open secrets straining at white hefty bags. Clink, clink, clink we rattle together, the ghosts of Garbage Thursdays past, present, and future. Via neighborly telepathy, I always reach the curb at the same moment as my friend Anya. She lives in Unit B of the Cloud Lake apartment complex. The name Cloud Lake is like a cemetery marker for the acres of water that once flowed here, drinking in the sunshine of the last century. We live in Multnomah County, Oregon, where the names of the dead can be found on condominiums and athletic clubs and doomed, whimsical businesses. Anya says she can feel the lake water rippling below the pavement. What I see is early morning mist. She says, is actually the vaporous ghost of Cloud Lake. Anya vibrates at a special frequency. She emigrated to Portland from Sarajevo and tells me she was epigenetically altered by her childhood experience of the Bosnian War. She smokes pre-rolled joints and has a secondary addiction to deep dish pizza. And we've developed a kind of whistling camaraderie on Garbage Thursday, what I imagine to be a gravedigger's rapport, like something out of Shakespeare. What's good, Mauve? She waves to me across the street, centaur before her own overflowing bin. Disposing of the evidence, I see. This curb is like the diary where we record our hungers, a diary slated for weekly erasure, the amnesiac's log of refuse. That used to strike me as a squeamish euphemism, but now I think it's the perfect word, noun, and verb for the toxic mosaic we make in our ad hoc collaboration on 9th Avenue. Through the upstairs window on Thursday nights, I watch a small, ephemeral mountain building itself on either side of the street. Everything my neighbors have refused to hold on to. Our dubious purchases and irreparable mistakes, the husks of daily life. On my pilgrimage to the curb, I've seen an imploding piano gusting sheet music like autumn leaves, an artificial lemon tree, a still-running Roomba flipped onto its back like Gregor Samsa, family-sized KFC buckets and like-new Keto Life diet books, a Lynchian arrangement of IKEA Malm dressers, the Stepford Wives of furniture, Ferris badminton rackets, mossy novelty bongs, a silver cage into which a wild crow had flown, sleekly pillaging some poor ghost's uneaten seeds, an unlucky vanity mirror with a lightning crack, a buck-toothed donkey piñata mysteriously intact, red rubber galoshes, size 14, that made me picture a barefoot giant wandering into the rain, confusingly geometric sex toys in every rainbow hue, a flattened pyre of Fisher-Price tricycles. It amazed me every Thursday, the sheer heft of what we could not digest, the aftermath of our appetites. Anya bent to stack her pizza box into a cheese and rain-cemented tower while I arranged my bottles into a calliope, ruby and indigo and emerald glass, so pretty in the moonlight. Sometimes I wonder if it was these jeweled colors that first drew the unicorn to our street. Strange prohibitions govern what can be said between two neighbors, even friendly neighbors, on a slab of asphalt in haunted October. Anya claims she knew I was pregnant before I did, but I didn't want to say anything, Mauve. You weren't showing, and the beginning is so touch and go. The tell was not subtle. Anya watched me collapse in my driveway. I was dragging the bins to the curb under a jack-o'-lantern moon, enjoying the lullaby of the little wheels, when something twisted sharply inside me. Pain dragged me to my knees. Anya ran across the street to help me up, and when I could breathe, I walked down the hill to the Cloud Lake Pharmacy. I am certain this drugstore is a mob front. They sell hemorrhoid creams and medicated lollipops and nothing else. Once I tried to buy Advil, and the sheepish clerk suggested that I try the Walgreens on Holgate. Incredibly, these likely mobsters had a single pregnancy test for sale. "What's gotten into you?" asked Edie, my roommate. "You seem nutso, more than usual." Something had indeed gotten into me. This new life marked reality so faintly, a watery pink line on a test. I held it up to the light, watching the pale line firm and darken. What a strange way to take the temperature of one's future. It seemed impossible that a life had planted itself inside me without my awareness. I had been moody and queasy, cratered with surprising acne. These signs seemed far too subtle to herald a baby's arrival. You'd think women would be alerted at the moment of conception, receive an unmistakable sign, like the crystal ball dropping on New Year's Eve. We should levitate above the bedsheets, our eyes should change color. But my body had behaved like a surly teenager, cranking her music behind a locked door, bass shaking through the walls, none of the lyrics intelligible. A line of poetry drifted back to me then, something I'd memorized in college for a grade and managed to hold on to all this time. And of ourselves and our origins, in ghostlier demarcations, keener sounds. To figure out the age of my possible baby, I turned to Google. Older generations felt connected to their foremothers by handwritten diaries, the ghostly wheel ruts of the Oregon Trail. I had autofill. Millions of others at this same phantasmal threshold had also typed my question into the search engine. How far along am I? Google directed me to a dubious oracle, the Pampers due date calculator. I plugged in my dates. The Pampers genie congratulated me. Your baby is 6 weeks old. The illustration of the embryo looked like a scowling pencil eraser. I waited to feel whatever you were supposed to at this juncture. Something, surely. I was freezing, chilled to the bone. Perhaps I had been for some time. I went to the hamper and borrowed 2 of Edie's sweaters, pulling one on top of the other. Out here, I struggled to do a load of laundry, yet somehow in the deep privacy of my body, an embryo built itself a spine. It was braiding neurons into a brain. Soon it would discard the tiny comma of a tail, which was vestigial and marvelous, tadpoled between 2 future legs. With every heartbeat, I realized a stranger grew stronger inside me, more human and more animal. When I finally called the doctor, the receptionist said breezily that they would see me in 6 weeks for my first ultrasound. The unspeakable rider to this appointment lifted out of the silence on the line. If you are still pregnant in 6 weeks' time. I didn't see the unicorn until the 10th week of my pregnancy. One garbage Thursday in November, facing a curtain of lightly falling snow, I put my boots on and pulled the compost bin through the slush, a quiver of arrows that week, amputated cherry boughs. I'd rescued one of Edie's quartz rosaries from the trash where it had snaked around the deadest branch. Too cheap to call an arborist, Edie had taken to hanging these discounted rosaries from the ailing foliage. Now our yard looked like an Uber driver's windshield. She bought them in bulk with her employee's discount from the St. Stephen's Religious Bookstore. Edie left a lot to God's care, and sometimes I had to step in for God with the pruning shears. At the curb, I stopped to catch my breath and stared up our driveway in time to see a feral creature lifting its pale skull from Anya's garbage. A single antler speared out of the middle of its brow. A deer, I thought, squinting through the fog. I had never seen a deer on 9th Avenue, certainly not in the dusk light of November, a blue hour when the porch lights switch on but the moon is unrisen and the northern stars are few and aloof. Was it a snow-covered doe? Could snow cover any creature so completely, from ankles to skull, eyelids to hooves? The antler wasn't an antler after all. It was a horn, long and cetacean, white as the birches that stood sentinel on our leafy block at night. Anya? I called shyly from my side of the street. Her windows were dark. Then I remembered Edie was volunteering at the women's shelter until 10, and so I had no saner pair of eyes to summon to my side as night fell around the Cloud Lake apartment complex. As far as I knew, I was the only person to witness this scavenger as she cantered down the highway, an ancient piece of pineapple pizza dangling from her lips like one of Edie's cigarettes. I decided not to mention her to anyone. I was afraid that I would chase her back out of time and into eternity if I spoke the word unicorn out loud. Craving salt is a survival mechanism, said the doctor, but in you it's gone haywire. Cookies, kiwis, ice cubes, salad, bread, the webbing of my hands, I was salting everything. Food became a vessel for iodine, and if there wasn't a shaker on the table, I wasn't interested in eating. Dr. Barreto told me that I was severely anemic and that I should remedy this with iron supplementation, not an ocean. Try cooking on a cast iron pan. Dr. Barreto was a portly Argentine man in his 50s who seemed to feel I was ridiculously old to be having a first baby. He always hit on my sister when she accompanied me, even when we spoke loudly about Caro's girlfriend Nieves. He scheduled my delivery for July 2nd, and it astonished me to learn that we could choose my baby's birthday. Because I would be 40 in July, a geriatric mother, he kept repeating with increasingly angry emphasis, as if this were a punchline I'd failed to get. He would be performing a cesarean section. Perform is a disconcerting verb to hear in relation to one's surgery. It made me think of sad circus seals and belligerent stand-up comedians. At another office, they did a high-tech new test. A vial of my blood disappeared into a sterile back room and got shaken down for information. You are having a daughter, said the friendly board technician, who had a photograph of twin girls in blue school plaids on her desk, and a yawning conviction about my baby's future reality that I wished I could feel. One night at the start of my second trimester, alone in our yard, I bent to lick at the salt block, a present from my sister. I don't know what possessed me. The pink crystals scraped at my tongue. Under my rib cage, the baby began to kick, and we developed a rhythm, lick, kick, lick, kick. When I rose from the salt block, the unicorn had reappeared. It had been hours since dinner, and the block had cooled, its color changing from sandy pink to Martian lake. The plants in the yard were a uniform blue, but the unicorn was lit unsteadily from within, flickering from white to gray, the wattage jumping each time she snorted. I recoiled in an awe that was also revulsion. Could a unicorn be rabid? Were their eyes always this feverish? I stared into her bottomless pupils, and I felt dizzy with echoes, filling with some kind of primordial déjà vu. My arms shot out as if I were wheeling over a stairwell. As I crept closer, I saw scuff marks on her horns and hooves that made me think insanely of bowling shoes. Parts of her were emaciated, her wishbone haunches, her thinning white mane. The unicorn whinnied once, exhaling spume. Her rib cage lifted like a shipwreck at low tide, the long bones curving up with each breath, while her large belly swung heavily below her. It sounds silly to feel sorry for a unicorn, but I did then. Time preys on unicorns just like the rest of us. Eternal beings, it seems, are not exempt from aging. The unicorn kept changing as she walked toward me. Like a hologram, she seemed to flicker between realities. Now she was a scabby trespasser, now an otherworldly traveler, ordinary, extraordinary, beautiful, ugly, starving to death, and luminously alive. Each time I blinked, her status shifted on me. Even her shadow seemed to change on the grass, elongating and twisting, melting and transforming, molten with light. "Oh," I shouted like a Jeopardy contestant, startling us both with my eureka syntax, having recognized her uncanny condition. How had I missed it? "Are you pregnant?" I had not guessed that an immortal could get knocked up. I wondered what the gestation time for a unicorn might be. Hours? Centuries? I took a few steps backward, snapping my fingers to beckon her to me and instantly regretting it. A unicorn is not a lost puppy, and I wanted to earn her trust. I wanted to soothe the concave ache that had driven her out of the ultraviolet and into the range of my senses. This hunger I believed we had in common, me and the unicorn. All right, guys, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. Wonderful. I mean, just amazing work. It was fun working on that with you too. I think the unicorn can be the spirit animal for this issue. Robert Coover is at last going to read. First public reading I ever gave from my debut novel, Come Sunday, back in 1988, was introduced by John Hawkes at Brown University. I still have the clearest memory of Hawkes's hallucinatory, free-form opening remarks comparing the book to Under the Volcano and merrily, relentlessly skewering Norman Mailer for reasons I didn't understand at the time and have long since forgotten. It was a full house, but the only person in the room besides Hawkes, who I was laser focused on, sat in the front row, arms crossed, an encouraging but analytical, inquisitive, take-no-prisoners look on his face. Robert Coover. Bob was and is one of a handful of postmodern fiction writers I held in the highest esteem, having cut my teeth on works like his Origin of the Brunists, the Universal Baseball Association Incorporated, the landmark collection of stories, prick songs, and descants, The Public Burning, Gerald's Party, and A Night at the Movies, just to name a few of his over 20 books. A lifelong spurner of traditional realism, he was quoted in an article in The Guardian as saying, "I learned my realism from guys like Kafka." Coover is a master of high-stakes literary gamesmanship, a linguistic wizard, a body bard as unfettered as he is disciplined, and a really lovely human being. By my count, the Coov, as his friends refer to him behind his back, has appeared in conjunctions some 20 times, going back to Conjunctions 12 in 1988 again, when he contributed a seminal essay on the subject of writing. We've been fortunate enough to publish some of what I consider to be among his best short fictions, including Alice in the Time of the Jabberwock, Punch, and Sir John Paper Returns to Honolulu, which were later collected in McSweeney's beautiful production of A Child Again, which you should order right now from McSweeney or from Oblong if you don't have a copy. It's a great book. I could go on about his pioneering work in the field of electronic publishing, his long stint as a writing professor at Brown University, where he founded the International Writers Project, a Freedom to Write program, and his generosity toward conjunctions, organizing conferences around earlier anniversaries. But I'd rather, like all of you, hear the man himself. So here's the Coov, Robert Coover. Take it away.
Thanks. My wife just came down the stairs. Thank you very much, Brad, for that lovely introduction. Brad is a key figure in what is our contemporary writing scene. He's elemental, in fact, and I've been privileged to know him and to think about his work for a long time. I mean, what he's done as a writer and as an editor. So I've come to this reading somewhat ill-prepared. I've been distracted by a number of things, and I'm going to read something from the beginning of from the book itself, from the magazine itself. Brad published the opening section, and I'll read a little bit from it, so figure it out. The street boy is cute in a dippy way with his funny chin whiskers, and sometimes I feel a convulsive little fanny flutter around him. Something has got inside me and is slithering around, but it's probably only hunger. Stomach has been growling like a lioness in heat. This is the one of the workers of the party that we're going to go to. And she's a caterer, as it were, and somewhat of a hander out of little bite-sized edibles. I peek under the lids of our dining room chafers. They're heavy, must be solid silver, or else plated cast iron. And in one of them, there's herbed lamb lollipops. Can't resist. I'm just sneaking a little bite when the first guest turns up way too early, looking confused. He is confused. Is it already over? He asks, peering around in alarm through his thick smeared specs. Frayed black suit, unlikely the only one he owns, might have been a tux once upon a time. Wrinkled white shirt, clip-on black bow tie, wild fringe of dirty white hair around his pink ears, a few dark threads pasted across the top. Probably a freeloader cruising buffets. I hold up one of the lollipops. No, you're just in time, Pops, the woman says with a wink and offers me one of the black balls on a bent stick she's chewing on. First customer of the night. I mutter a desperate no thank you and flee to the family bar. So the idea in this book really is that every character is has a kind of virus as a point of view. And the virus moves, it's a viral narrator. This viral narrator moves from character to character. And it has a kind of life of its own, but it's not really anything other than a viral narrator. So it says things that don't get repeated. And here, for example, I mutter a desperate no thank you and flee to the family bar. A glass of water, I tell a young man in there. With ice, please. Have I come to the wrong place? Nothing in my pockets. I must have left the invitation in my room. But it feels right to be here. The owners have money. Maybe they're patrons of the arts, aware of my importance to the development of world music. In fact, wasn't Mrs. What's-Her-Name, the owner's wife, once a student of mine? Thanks. That hand passing into the picture is the poet John Cayley, and he's helping me sort out my life a little bit. So I walk the water over to and adopt a thoughtful expression, pretending I can see it. It's a painting taking up most of the back wall. It's not just the wallpaper, and adopt a thoughtful expression, pretending I can actually see it. A contorted human figure, a still life, a falling building. What else can one do when we are at a party and no one else is there? Maybe I should go out and come back in again. It wouldn't be the first time I've had to do that. I was once invited to conduct a program that included one of my own groundbreaking masterpieces, and it was felt that only I could properly interpret it, meaning no one else understood it. I walked on stage, rapped my baton vigorously on the lectern, raised my arms, and with a flamboyant gesture meant to awe the audience, called for the opening crash of orchestral dissonance, but was met with silence. Then scattered laughter and applause and imbecilic protest by neo-romantics. No, it was my fault. I had seen an orchestra that wasn't there. They were still filing in. The whole auditorium erupted in whinnying laughter. So let me skip ahead, given the time. There's always been something atonal about my music, but in the early days, it moved rigidly down a linear path toward climax. Its implicit anger nestled snugly in the bars and lines of the omnipresent stave. I didn't ask where the stave came from, how it acquired the authority that it had. But then one day I did. The result was my first breakaway piece, The Stave Is Gone. Much more important was answering the dodecaphone, and written for string quartet and triangle that same feverish year, but it's almost unplayable. When the lead violinist complained about that in an interview, we saw to it that his entire quartet was dismissed. So The Stave Is Gone is what is stuck, and though trivial, this defines me to this day. In fact, it was still being played a year or two ago, though admittedly that was mainly because an animated film used a tone row from it as a track for one of his cat and mouse chases. So he lives inside the change of from a little like my own experience of changing from and he comes to the idea of a piece, something that has been assassinated by non-musical ruffians. So maybe that's the piece I've been struggling to write for the past decade. The new thing I must finish before I die, the operatic tale of the murder of a heroic form. Can a form be a hero? Of course it can. While musing about that, I seem to hear these 3 bell-like notes. They sound over and over as though to impress upon me their urgency. I recognize them. They're the first 3 notes of a classical overture that I once borrowed for a famous parody. There was a 3-word note taped to the entrance door, bold enough for me to read with my nose pressed against it, and the sequence seemed to be singing them, as though the phrase in its clarity and purity were asking to title the work. Maybe I'm imagining the notes, or maybe they're real, but good grief, they are real. They're the door chimes. Crowds are pouring in. I can tell by the vapidity of their clamor that these people are musical illiterates. Will they even know who I am? I avoid them by slipping into the next room where the mocking chimes are less intrusive. I fill my empty water glass at the kitchen tap, my hands trembling. Who are these people? The world grows uglier by the hour. The windows over the sink look out on what is apparently a roof terrace, still bathed in an early evening glow. Wait, aren't I supposed to give a lecture on the new music out here? It's why I'm here, for God's sake. I seem to have left my notes at home, but no matter. I've been a teacher all my life, and the topic's my topic. Those 3 classic notes are still ringing, an urgent call, muffled now by the shouted banalities. I could start with that sequence as an introduction to my new work in progress, with its ironic title of the 3 words they're just seen on the door, which each syllable dominated by a nasal hum. Then tell them how the piece will open the door to a deeper understanding of serialism, and thus my own oeuvre within it. It's maybe the most difficult and at the same time most accessible thing he has ever written, they will say. Perhaps I'm getting excited about it. If it weren't for the nuisance of this lecture, I'd get started immediately. On a counter near the door to the terrace is an old cello lying on its back. I lower my face to it and discover it's an 18th century Montagnana, but just carelessly dropped there. The vulgar power of the rich. Pressing my ear to the strings, each one of them seems to be sound itself. Is it trying to speak to me? Letting me know what I must tell these ignorant boobs? I borrow this cello and step out onto the terrace, moving toward what looks like a lectern and a microphone, but it turns out to be just a tall, bushy plant. Are there people out here? Over there, squatting in the bushes. A naked woman. What is she doing? No, wait. She's only a statue. Must be. What? Did she just move? Oh my God. Why have I come out here? He wheels around, but finds the door locked, bangs on it in panic. Not many things make me happy. This makes me happy. Perhaps the old fart senses me watching, for he backs off, looking confused and guilty. He is guilty, and not only for stealing the museum piece, he's a tyrannical, half-blind old cunt who got me thrown out of music school, ruined my career. So much for reading the stuff from the past. Let me just conclude with a note from the present. It's a striptease by a nun. How I end the book, called Open House. And the nun who's been punctuating the night with a parade of irregularities now slowly strips off the rest of her habit, the coif and wimple and black crepe decorations, the scapular and detachable sleeves, the knee aprons, all these things she flings to the audience around her, one garment at a time. An apron swats me in the face like a castigation, swaying ritually that the while the removal of each item a sacred act. The old roue crawls up onto the stage on his knobby knees. People are laughing, but I can no longer laugh with them, as I often have said that I don't know what's coming, but I'll go with it. I'll go with it laughing. I'm trying, but no laughter emerges, not even a sardonic snort. The nun embodies a dark, amoral force up here, one that has no voice of its own, no desires, no purpose, and no capacity to reason. Life itself, life and death mean nothing to it. It carries on, it's outside the self, but is experienced within. When people speak of a nameless dread, this is what they are usually talking about. I know it has been happening, it's been tunneling through me all my life. Now in particular, despair, emptiness, aimlessness, they're all part of it. But they are not the thing itself, which exists apart from all thoughts about it. Add that it's universal and collective, and I feel like what I've just been describing is love. When it's time to remove the serge tunic, the nun pauses until she has everyone's close attention. I'm sorry. Reading off screen is not easy. The underskirts are cast off slowly, one by one, until the nun arrives at her lacy, old-fashioned drawers. The drawers are held up by a drawstring at the waist. With a sly look at the fallen old boy, she tugs on the knot, and just as the drawers drop, she reaches for a zipper at her throat, unzips her body, and steps out of it Her bones rattle in a kind of applause. The nun peels back the rubbery flesh off her hands, finger by finger, like removing gloves. She takes off her face, puts the stiff white cornet back on her grinning skull, and reaches inside the woman on the floor. A bespectacled lady rises from the audience, announcing that she's a licensed midwife, and together they extract a tiny, soft skeleton, which the nun presses to her ribs. The nun shows the lady where her double chins. Her zipper is locked within her double chins, her zipper is locked, and steps in front of the musicians to lead them in an eerily festive, high-picking dance of the dead, joined by the infant skeleton's now bony mother, wearing her pudendum between her dancing legs like a flower. I have long believed that flesh is nothing but a costume for the terrified beast within, but never imagined pulling it off like a jumper, which is how the nun, the lady, and the cavorting musicians relieve themselves of their bodies. They play a discordant triple meter, jig, then clicking bones marking the jaunty rhythm. Those in the audience who wish to join the dance are welcomed and shown where their zippers are. All goes smoothly, except when the zipper gets stuck, which can be severely painful to judge by the frenetic rattling of bones. Some discard their flesh as they're weary of it. Others planning to wear it again, fold it up and lay it carefully to one side. Oh, man. When it's the turn of the bossy businesswoman, the one who played the chesty bride led at the staged wedding, those who turn down the invitation to dance are unceremoniously thrown from the penthouse terrace by a skeleton in a cowboy hat, some like the ecstatic saxophone honker, bleeding away, or too distracted by their holy madness, as the old evangelist would have it, even to find their zipper. But up here, everything's capital crime. It's over. And sorry about the nature of the reading.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. That was just brilliant.
Last reading, I did.
I'm sorry, Bob, what did you say?
I said you probably heard the last reading.
Well, that was just wonderful, amazing. Karen and I are quoting you on the chat over here. So, well, thanks to all of you. It's just an astonishing reading and such beautiful and very different work, different voices. And thank you, Susanna and everyone at Oblong for having us tonight.
Thank you, Brad, for organizing the farewell party of this book. And being such a terrific person.
Thank you all so much for being a part of the special night, and congratulations to Bradford and everyone at Conjunctions and all of the authors over all of the years for the incredible work you've brought to readers all over the world.
Thank you. Thanks for everyone coming tonight, too.
Thank you all so much, you guys. Have a wonderful evening.
Support independent publishers and independent bookstores.
Yes.
See you later.
Good night.
Good night.
So long.